You'd hang around for questions a little later, in case somebody has questions. And in this panel, I expect y'all to get up and ask some questions. So jump right in there. I'm Tom Rose. I'm a fully certified Doug. 35 years with TXU Corp up in Dallas. Was considered a little bit of a maverick, which in the utility business is not too radical. But the purpose, what we're going to do now, is we've got 4 new experts up here that have all started or starting businesses. And technology, as John says, is great. But if you can't figure out how to monetize it, how to make a business out of it, how to make money on it, it'll never grow. And that's, and it may be a great thing for mankind, great technology, but if it's not going to make money, it won't grow. And so it's not just esoteric discussion. And so yes, Tom Rose.
Yay, Tom!
Yeah. Okay. This isn't about me. This is about them. But I'm going to set it up real quick and then have them introduce themselves and discuss their interest today. To me, we're facing the new normal. We hear that all the time. What's the new normal? It's just rapid change of all kinds, up and down, back and forth. It's not linear. It'll go up, it'll go down, no matter what you do. And you got to look at cybersecurity threats, digitization, pandemics, decarbonization, social media unrest, institutional distrust, racial unrest, so on and so forth. So you can look at that and either be scared that that's coming and those rapid changes are coming, or you can see that as an opportunity. Because that's really what it is. And if you look across the history of the world, the last 50,000 years, you'll see that it's those times of rapid change that have produced the most innovation and the most new business models. And so we're here today to talk about the new business models. And we've got a great cast of characters up here in addition to John that we're going to go through. So let's start over, Jim, and give you about 2 or 3 minutes to introduce yourself and go from there.
2 or 3 minutes to introduce myself. Nice to be here today. Thank you, Tom.
You bet.
Jim Steffes, longtime power person, although I'm now working in a gas utility. I wouldn't claim to be a Doug because I've only been in a gas utility now for about 9 months.
You don't qualify.
So I'm still learning. I'm head of government and regulatory policy for Washington Gas Light. Little gas utility, supports our nation's capital, suburban Maryland and Virginia, about 1.2 million customers. Just a little history, Washington Gas Light was set up in 1848, so quite a few years ago, by a congressional charter. And for those that don't know, the word light at the end of our name is because that's what we did. We effectively manufactured synthetic gas, took it up to the Capitol, so they could light Capitol Hill. I like to think we brought the first bit of transparency to our government. So when I talk about new business models, so what is our business model? Our business model is to deliver and supply natural gas, which for those that are not aware, natural gas is a fossil fuel. I'm just going to lay that out there right now. There is this term, and we heard it earlier, decarbonization. And decarbonization is a big issue for our society, for our communities, for our cities. The district itself, the District of Columbia, has in 2018 put forward a very large plan to decarbonize its future, moving somewhat aggressively, not next week, but over the next few years, next decades, we're going to be changing. So we, as a gas utility, are evolving our business model. We are looking about how we operate and continue to supply necessary and critical infrastructure to our communities such that they can have the heat, the light, the power they need to carry forward. And I'm happy to talk about that. It's online, but effectively it's under 3 big categories we're looking. And so it's very different for utility. The biggest one is that we're focused on end use and sort of efficiency. And so we're going to have to bring significant reductions forward as our customers use our product, and our product is both the infrastructure and the commodity, differently. Secondly, we're going to have to look and think about our distribution system and our operations. So where the world of the gas utility is leaks and maintaining old and aging infrastructure. We're going to have to rapidly think new ways about making sure that we're not creating greenhouse gas emissions because of our own operations. And finally, sourcing and supply, and you've all heard it, renewable natural gas, certified natural gas, and this concept of hydrogen as some sort of fuel or energy carrier. All of that's going to come about. So it is interesting to be at a utility and a gas utility in this world of decarbonization. And how do we evolve? And we're evolving rapidly. And we look forward to evolving with our customers and our communities over time. So thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
You bet. Don, you want to
Sure.
jump in next?
Yeah. Okay, Andre, you going to stand up and ask who that is? I was going to get the same plug. My name's Don Whaley. I'm not a Doug, I'm just an old guy, so that'd be an Og, right? I guess.
That's correct.
Something like that. Been in the the power business for a number of years. The last 20 dedicated mostly to ERCOT. I started a rep here when the market first opened, grew it, and in the process of starting a new one, which is the reason I'm here actually. It's the retail market in Texas, while it's 20 years old, exhibits about the same level of innovation it did about 20 years ago. When I first met Andre, you remember this was about 10 years ago, we'd gotten together with a couple of former commissioners and some others, and we had this grandiose idea we're going to start the utility of the future, the rep of the future, I think is what we were going to call it. And even though we were possessed of lots of brilliance, we didn't have a receptive market. And so I think that the thing that's neat about the time we're in right now is that despite all the catastrophe of the winter storm Uri, it has finally prepared the ground to where the regulators, the legislators, but most importantly the consumers, back to that how do you make money at it, are receptive to the notion that something new is needed. The grid we have in Texas was built for centralized, fossil-based, regulated generation, stuff that Tom knows all too well, large, high velocity or high voltage transmission, hub and spoke transmission. And those days are changing. By the end of this year, we'll be 40+% renewable, non-responsive generation. And as any electrical engineer will tell you, you have to have a balanced system. And if you can't ramp up or ramp down your generation, you have to have a load that responds. The company that I'm starting, well, it's the company that I'm starting here in Texas is an offshoot of a company by the name of Ohm Connect in California, which is the largest residential demand response provider in the state. We've aggregated residential load that represents about 160 megawatts of dispatchable load that we bid into the Cal ISO, both on the demand side and in the energy markets. And so what we're going to be doing here that is unique and I think timely is lots of reps offer demand response, but it's something shiny that they offer their customers to try to tell them why they're different. Our offering is going to be one that integrates that value to both the consumer and to the market of demand response into our core offer. So we'll be providing the commodity, but then we'll be enabling them through technology to reduce and control or shift their load in times of crisis that should help us substantially, if we gain some traction, stabilize the market to address peak events, both load and pricing. And while it would not have averted the events of February of this year, because that was a 25 gig drop, there's enough material load out there that is controllable to where we can make a big difference. My favorite example, and Tom and I were talking about it, I think it's safe to assume that every Texas home has, on average, 2 refrigerators. Probably 4 in some, 1 in the other, but on average 2. And if you take the 6 million meters in Texas, multiply that times 2, that's 12 million refrigerators. Controlling those devices alone is 2 gigs of generation. And it's a thermal load that's not a 15-minute or 20-minute, it's a 2-hour, 4-hour, and it doesn't affect anything. So the potential's there, it's the most untapped resource that we have, and it's obviously the cheapest and most readily deployable, so we're excited to be in Texas.
Great, Don. I appreciate that. And so out of the winter storm, out of a crisis comes innovation.
Never blow a good
Never
crisis.
blow a crisis. Gabriel, you want to jump in?
Sure. Hey everyone, Gabriel Reyna here from Bandera Capital. So I've spent, I guess, most of my career in the energy space, and so in the, I guess, developing capital projects, a lot of finance roles and capital projects. And now at Bandera, I mean, what we're doing, I think we're in a unique I guess, perspective in terms of this forum here. But we're investors. We are looking across some of these big themes that we're talking about here today, digitization, decarbonization, decentralization, and we're looking for those technologies, those founders, and those CEOs that are out in the market, trying to, play to these trends, and we are supporting these companies and these people to engage with the market and kind of take next steps. So, I think it's a really interesting time right now. I mean, this forum is really, we've heard, talks on infrastructure, mobility, on AI. It's a really exciting time right now. And so certainly from where I'm sitting, we're seeing a lot of new business models that are being enabled by technologies. We have blockchain companies in our portfolio. They're working across the energy space and trying to create solutions there. We have analytics technologies, and that's cuts across, agriculture and infrastructure and things like that. But I think, when we talk about business models, and hopefully we get into this a little bit later, a lot of times what we're seeing in terms of, to John's point, how do you make money? Technology is the technology unless it's applied in the right way, commercialized. There's a lot of technology out there now being used in different areas, and I think what we're seeing, a lot of near-term opportunity to create business models that are working is technologies that already exist. It's not necessarily the blockchains, it's other elements, some hardware, some software, but it's combining those in a way and applying them to maybe a new sector or a new industry that we're seeing a lot of near-term value and business models that are succeeding. So exciting to be here today, and I look forward to having a discussion with the rest of these guys.
Yeah, the money is don't they say the water to the plant, to the seed that grows? So Akash, why don't you jump in and tell us a little bit?
Thank you. My name is Akash Kanjia. I am a part-time law professor at NYU and just recently co-founded a small startup which is working on commercializing DoD-developed energy technologies. In terms of my background, I used to be a management consultant at McKinsey where I did some upstream and renewable energy work, and most recently I was at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York where I was a trader and a portfolio manager, and during COVID ran one of the emergency lending facilities. I also used to be an intern for Tom way back in the day at
Well, you
TXE.
didn't have to say that.
That's the highlight of my career, Tom. And in terms of business models, in my daily life now, I am realizing a lot of what Tom and John and Gabriel have touched on, in that the amount of technology that's out there is enormous, but it just gets made and people have no idea how to use it. People make cool stuff, it just collects dust on the shelf. So I think this topic of thinking about how to take existing technology and create customer value and create wealth out of it is timely.
Absolutely, and it's not wealth for wealth's sake. I mean, if it's not economic, it'll never happen in Africa. It will never happen in anywhere. And so it's important that it's there. Now, one basic principle my dad taught me, even though he was former Air Force, it was when he owned a dairy farm out in East Texas and he had me working there. And there's many parts to any business that runs. But what's the most important part of any business? It's the customer. So we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the customer value. How do you determine customer value? Because I think that's what sets a business up. Whether it's a simple little technology or an idea or science, you have to have that customer that's willing to write that check, or you don't have a business. Now, I've got to, Gabriel, I've got to have money too to help fund making that business work. I've got to have employees, I've got to have management teams, everything else. But if I don't have the customer, I don't have a business. So let's start, and Don, why don't you start this time, talk about how you're trying to create customer value right now.
Well, that's the, I would say 64,000, but that's not even real money anymore. But it's a big question. And the key is, and the reason that what we're betting on is that value is a perception item. It's what's important to one is not to the other. And it's finding that one central theme that resonates with a sufficient number of customers that creates an enterprise that then can sustain itself. And with all the, we've gone through all the buzzwords. We've gone through decarbonization, decentralization, automation, blah, blah, blah. And those are words to so many consumers that don't necessarily resonate. And it's trying to find the right blend that delivers a tangible value to that end user. That's the challenge. And I think that's why, as I mentioned, I'd rather be lucky than good most times, and our timing in the wake of the storm has awakened finally a consuming population that generally doesn't think about energy. Energy is generally just viewed as certainly a right or maybe an entitlement. You're supposed to be able to flip the switch and the light comes on, and if it doesn't, whom do I call and get angry at?
Yeah.
And recognizing now that as participants in this grid that's supposed to be smart, that thus far hasn't shown a great deal of intelligence, we need to empower those customers with that responsive capability to where they can participate, right, and they can make that smart. And I mean, I guess that's really the value proposition we're trying to buy. Your dad in the dairy farm, the adage I always had was, if a leader without a follower is just a guy taking a walk. And I don't want to be that guy taking the walk. So we're hoping we can create that.
Jim, you've been working with customers,
sure,
developing values.
I guess I come at it a little bit different. Clearly at Washington Gas, we provide safe, reliable, affordable, energy. I think the other points that I would say in terms of value creation, which we can't lose sight of, is that all of these applications which will create incremental value, and again, designed for the specific consumer, which I'm a big believer in, are built on a platform of a reliable and solid infrastructure. And I think that's one of the things that we can't lose sight of as we move forward, which is there is a platform to build a smart city comes from having at least 2 streets that cross, because you don't have a city if you don't at least have 1 stoplight. So I think that's a big piece of what we have to remember. I completely agree with Dawn that it is about, designing that solution that works for the specific customer. I'll just keep reminding that unless we have that electric grid that works, that gas grid that works, that water grid that works, and we often forget about the core of those infrastructures. We need to make them smarter and better, but we have to keep them at the top of all of our minds as we work to evolve this industry more broadly.
Yeah, and I would include telecom and roads and any infrastructure that's out there. Soon to be the sky with the VTOL. So it's interesting. Akash, you want to jump on this customer value? You're working on that proposition today, I think.
Yes, I am. In terms of the value proposition I was working on today, what I've learned is, so with my background as a finance and consultant person, my inclination is to think of customer value as being quantitative. So one rubric I've used in the past is number of people affected times amount of pain removed. That being said, I don't think that is how people make decisions. So I'll just tell a really quick story about my uncle after the winter storm. So they lost power in Houston briefly, but my uncle got pretty scared about the prospect of relying on the grid. And this goes back to what Tom was saying about fading trust in institutions, which we see at all levels of society. And he wanted to buy a diesel generator for his backyard for $12,000. And I was like, you're insane. But the motivator there was fear and a lack of trust. And for him, value is what allays that fear. So when I think about what we can do in the battery space in the DoD environment, we're starting our pitch with, well, this is how it affects the consumer emotionally. So just trying to think about things not so much from a left brain way, but more of a right brain way.
That's right. Gabriel?
Yeah, I think, the way I think about it is on the value side, we're talking about the customer, the consumer, right? The person, people.
The one writing the check.
Yeah, that's right. We're creatures of habit, I guess, right? So we're selfish. We want things faster, more convenient, on demand, flexible, right? And, to your point, Akash, as an entrepreneur, starting with that, I think that's the right place to start, right? But some of the things that we're talking about, we're talking about societal infrastructures, whether that's digital or real asset type stuff, right? Like we need these things to get built in order for these models to work. And in there are other customers. It's not just the person, it's the public the utility maybe, government, private companies that also have to engage. And so I think, we can't simplify the customer as the person. I think starting from there is a good place to start. But, inevitably we end up with getting through the mess and building a business, commercializing an idea. There's all these other entities that have to come to the table and get aligned around what value actually means for everyone. And so I think sitting across that table, you end up with inevitably some trade-offs. And so, I think to your point is what are those areas that there is common alignment and common values that you can, put something around. So I think, my point there, I guess, is starting with the customer, the person is the right point, but I think it's let's not oversimplify it. There's other elements there.
True enough. A matter of fact, coming up in the electric business, always asked the question and always got the same answer. What's a kilowatt hour and why do we sell our product as a kilowatt hour? Because that's what we pay the bill on. And yet I go to a smartphone, I'm buying much more than than paying for telecom. Okay, internet, the whole 9 yards. And so I think we've got to rethink in the energy business, and I think to grow the electricity business, we got to think past that and really communicate with customers on a basis that they understand. Okay, like saving money on refrigerators and such. So we've got to think about it in a different way.
But if I'm just going to jump in. Why not?
You bet, jump in, Jim. You're shy.
Oh, yeah, I am, but that's a different story. It's interesting what Akash said. And look, the fact of the matter is all businesses say they want to be customer-centric, but they're really product-centric. That is the fundamental gap in everything we've seen. You talk about sort of energy tech, a couple of years ago, and it had great ideas, great product. But then but none of them had any sensibility of ever having been in front of a door and saying, hey, I have 30 seconds of time. Can I put this product in your pocket and you're going to give me money for it? This is the real challenge is we're built around engineers and really smart people that bring products to market, and that's a really hard way to do things.
It is.
It's just, and until we become, as an industry, customer-centric, even talk about, John, and with cities, we go at it still with products for cities. We don't really go to cities and say, hey, Mrs. Mayor, what makes you happy today? And how can I be centric around your world and what you're faced with every single minute? So it's just the nature of what we do. I love people say I'm going to have the best business in the world, and then they say, give me the product catalog. Right? It's just the approach. Sure. And I'm guilty of it too, so I'm not,
Well, we're all guilty of it. At the dairy farm, my dad was trying to tell me, yeah, pay attention to the cows. I need you to milk them twice a day and blah, 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 and the feed bill and everything else. But if they didn't come pick that milk up every 3 days,
yeah,
and it spoiled, and he had to pour it out on the street, that's not good.
Yeah.
That's a real problem. John, did you have any thoughts on customer value? Brief thoughts?
I think, the only thing I want to do is when I turn my switch light on, I want the lights to come on.
Yeah.
I don't even think about it. But my point is that how that is delivered and who will sell it will change. So I think that the product of electricity is a product that people don't even think about unless there's a storm, and then all of a sudden people think about it. So it's a different category. It's a commodity that's a different category where people have a choice. So I don't have a choice of electricity, la electricity, or ja electricity. It's all the same. So what happens in an industry like this is that you look at how the science of delivery will change and who will be delivering, it to the customer. So one person can own all the wires. You got to deal with that. But what will change is how people come in and be competitive in a different kind of way so that you can purchase. So we know that, for example, that ERCOT just rolls up all of the mom and pop kinds of electric companies around in Texas, right? And they manage right. They manage the load and et cetera. I think all of that will be automated in the future, okay? I think it'll be a whole nother deal. And then when it's automated, then people can purchase it in different kind of ways. So whether it's Tesla, whether it's Amazon, or whoever it is, then they become repetitive to how it is delivered. But for the most part, when I turn my lights on, you make sure they keep coming on, and then I won't think about it.
There you go. That's for sure. So you're talking about blockchain, because that's already
Yeah.
there's already trading platforms on blockchain. And Akash, did you want to jump in? Since you come from a centralized bank background, what's your thoughts on blockchain and crypto mining and what have you?
So I think leaving aside crypto mining, but blockchain more macro, I think the energy industry is among the best use cases for smart contracts. And here's my hot controversial take for the day. I think retail electric providers are in serious trouble. And the reason I say that is because blockchain has the potential to disrupt middlemen in virtually all industries. So you think about Uber. Uber is a middleman between a person that wants to go from point A to point B and somebody who's going to give them the service of getting from point A to point B. And we have this middle platform. I have to use the middle platform because I don't trust the Uber driver. So I need Uber to go vet them and make sure that they're not a terrorist and all that kind of stuff. In the same way, retail electric providers are intermediaries between the people that produce the electrons and the people that use the electrons. As John was saying, we can't get rid of the people that do the wires. Somebody has to do the work of actually transporting the electrons. But using smart contracts and blockchain as an individual consumer, I could just buy power directly from an independent generator or from my neighbor that has a battery installed in their house. And that all happens automatically, and AI runs everything, and everything is recorded, all the transactions, all the cash flows happen on a blockchain. So I'm just not even sure what the value add of an REP would be in that world.
Oh, let me take a crack at that.
Jump at that. You got a couple.
Yeah, no, it's, no, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. But the good news for me is the average consumer isn't you. That most people don't even understand how to spell blockchain, much less how to use it. And I think you're probably right. At some point in the future, that disintermediation, doing away with the middleman, I can punch it up on my phone and trade power with my next door neighbor. That's great. But we won't be here, I won't be here when that happens, because the regulations associated with that, and that point that John made, when I flip my lights on, I want the lights to come on. The level of complexity of ensuring stability from a system that is run with 30 million different traders dealing directly with the independent generators is not in the foreseeable future. So in the meantime, the greatest threat to retail electric providers in this market and other markets is every kilowatt looks just the same. And so until you can deliver some value premise to the customer-centric, I do love that. Everybody says that. That's
Yeah.
back in my early utility days, there was a utility executive that said we don't have customers, we have points of impedance. So I knew that we've come a long way now. But the fact of the matter is that if we can't deliver a tangible, measurable, the customer, to your point, did I relieve some pain? Then we deserve to go extinct. And that's why I'm excited about the model we
And
have.
there's also that trust factor, I think.
Sure.
That middleman trust factor, if you can build that kind of relationship and trust.
But can
Gabriel,
I-
are you seeing an increase in blockchain investment
Yeah, no,
proposals and crypto and everything else?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to build on what Don and Akash are saying, I think, the energy retail space, right? There's a lot of transactions. You have the intermediary there. It is a ripe area to deploy distributed ledger technologies and blockchain, right? But to Don's point, that we're very far away from that. It's highly regulated space. The reliability is an issue. But keeping on the theme of new business models, and I think Don and what he's doing, the company he's working with, and others in that space are, sitting in a really interesting position, because without a doubt, in the same way that distributed ledger and blockchain technologies are gaining traction and trust, and now having policy rewritten around that, their enabled kind of areas in finance, we're going to see that, in the energy space. We're seeing that already. I mean, we do a lot of work in Australia. We're working with a company called the NOSI. They're trialing, basically the model that Akash just talked about now in Australia, where basically, it's no longer relying on that intermediary, and people are able to kind of trade energy with each other. But it's a point, it's a pilot, it's a point thing. It's the scalability is not there. It's being tested for functionality more than scalability, right? So I think what what does the industry look like and what are the opportunities between now and then, right? And say that then is 10, 15, 20 years away, right, before we get to that space. Companies like Don's working with, you know, are kind of in that transitionary space, right? They're
Right.
What are solutions that are going to work now going towards that direction, heading in that direction, but things that are tangible, things that play with the current state of policy and these other constraints. So I think, you know, yeah.
Then there is a company out there, I don't know if y'all have heard about it, it's called American PowerNet. Andreas and I have been working with Scott Helm, who's CEO of that out of Reading, Pennsylvania, and he runs a blockchain trading operation. Guess who the first customer sets are for them? Universities. They get it. They understood it. They get it right off the bat, and they trust it. And so it's that trust factor that gets tied in there.
Well, you know that some years ago, AT&T asked McKinsey to project the number of cell phones that would be in the world, and they said 500,000. 400 million, I mean, they missed it by a factor of whatever have you. The thing about studying enterprise is that very seldom does the established enterprise understand what's happening in the laboratory around them, and they usually get hit sideways, whether it's Sears and Roebuck in the retail trade, or rather it's America Online. You remember America Online? Right?
Yes.
With Facebook, right? Whether it is the typewriter and the computer. So when you have your eye, as we should have, on a university, then it's hard to visualize. You know, my question is, why are universities still building buildings, right? Because it took the pandemic for us to come up with different kinds of business model almost overnight. So if the technology is there, I think the blockchain stuff in all transactions, whether it's banking, whether it's any kind of middleman enterprise, I think that it is much sooner than you think it is. So that is the story of enterprise since the telegraph, you know, from the Pony Express to the telegraph, to the telephone, telecommunications. So it's very, very interesting to watch. So you just don't want to be another Sears and Roebuck watching Walmart do their thing.
Right. Jim, did you have any final thoughts on that topic?
So I totally appreciate the idea that smart contracts make perfect sense in a market like this. I mean, you know, I'll just come back. I'm not the finance person at the table, but at the end of the day, we're still talking, even on the production side of power, relatively large-scale assets, right? Where today, if you try to finance a 100-megawatt solar array, you're not going to do it built on blockchain contracts at the bottom line, right? So there is, I think you're right. It goes slower than, you know, some people think, but probably when it starts to happen, it'll happen. Where we see it, I've seen, you know, prior, there was another company, LO3 Energy, was trying to do some of this blockchain energy as well. It's just hard. It's one of those things where it will happen when it happens, but I'm not sure when. It makes a lot of sense. There's still a lot of pieces on the cash flows of this industry that you have to figure out and make sure work on top of that.
And the idea of settling on a daily basis
Or
is interesting.
Why
but at
wait?
the same
Why
time,
wait till
it's
a
tough.
day? Why wait till
why
the
not
end of the
every
day?
hour? Sure.
Cash should move every minute if I can get the
Well,
Federal Reserve to let it flow. Right.
Let's take this idea of customer and shift gears a little bit to an issue that John brought up around this carbon neutral or zero carbon society in 10, 20, 30 years. And talk about how do you translate that concept or idea to a customer that's buying energy? And I'm talking all kinds of energy, whether it's car, you know, gasoline, oil, plastics, whatever.
Well, that comes back to your definition of value that I was talking about.
It is the definition.
The definition, well, value is derived by individual perception. So that decarbonization, how do you drive that to the individual consumer? Our parent company's in California. And so they talk about ending California blackouts, saving the world, stopping the next dirty, inefficient gas plant from coming online. And we effectively dispatch 160 megawatts of negawatts. And it gets treated just like anything fired by fossil. That same message is likely not going to resonate quite so loudly in Texas, where the embrace of the threat of climate change is not nearly so universally held. So, but the thing about all these technologies that we're talking about, to the extent, we don't have a shortage of power, bulk power in Texas. We have a shortage of power at certain times. Right. And so if we want to drive more efficient utilization, Griddy, nobody talks about Griddy anymore, but to their credit, they took the first real swing at trying to demonstrate to consumers that power at different times of the day has different values and change that behavior.
Yeah, now we have octopus energy.
Yeah. Well, we do. For now. We'll see. But no, octopuses, they're mirroring the same thing that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that decarbonization is something that's now in everybody's mind. How do we go to a lower carbon footprint? Everybody's estimating what theirs might be. And I think if that becomes more central to people's thinking, then that whole decarbonization effort is
I'm seeing it already as the
Sure.
winter storm. And we went through the legislative session, and I worked with them going through that. This idea of demand side, every commodity has a supply and it has a demand.
Right.
And you just have to balance them. Now, the trick with electricity, 1/60th of a second.
Yeah,
Shelf life,
you got to balance quick.
You produce it when you use it, is an interesting concept, which is where storage comes in and is a huge disruptive technology for typical traditional electric utilities. Jim, did you have a thought on global climate change and zero emissions being a gas company?
Gas company? We sure do. Well, what we do is we have customers that are expressing their preference for a cleaner future, both directly through their own actions, but also indirectly through their political and policy leadership. So we're seeing that today, and we're trying to be responsive to it. The informed element of that will continue to grow. And we do anticipate that, and that's why, again, we've put forward our own climate business plan, because we know it's not, we're not both deaf to our customers but deaf to the world. We're not. We believe strongly that we have a role. We also believe strongly that at the end of the day, you still have to provide, and what consumers need is safe, affordable, and reliable energy. And we'd make the case, if you look, again, what we would say is there are lots of people that say we must electrify everything and policy-driven electrification. I think if you look at our climate business plan, we would say a fuel-neutral decarbonization effort is in fact more reliable and much, much more affordable. To the billions of dollars in terms of affordability. And this is going to be a conversation that's going to be had at sort of the market level, but also at the customer level. Right. And being customer-centric around how each consumer business, will lead. You talk about universities leading on blockchain with AMP. Mm-hmm. I think the same will happen in this space. But that's how we see it. It is a no longer sort of an issue. It's sort of every day we have to think about that, and we are trying to.
Cool. Akash, thoughts?
So I'll say, Don, I broadly agree with you. I'm a big time skeptic on net zero and decarbonization in general. And the reason for that is because ultimately this comes down to who's going to pay for it. So it's one thing to want a cleaner earth, and it's another thing to get somebody to open up their wallet and make sacrifices in other parts of their life to do that. I agree that over time, I think cultural norms will shift. We'll just agree that we ought to lead a cleaner existence in the same way that, and at some point in the future, it won't be controversial in the same way that the idea that all humans should have equal rights at points in history have been controversial, but are largely not controversial today. But it's going to take time, and in the meantime, I just don't think people are going to pay for it. And I also think that upstream's not going to go away, because there's some things we can electrify, but we still need plastics. We need petrochemicals for that. You still have to fly planes. There's no battery technology that's going to solve flight. So I don't think y'all are going to go out of business. We still need peakers. We need reliable power. If Mother Nature shuts off the sun and the wind for a while, we still need natural gas. So I think if you really want to get to net zero, you have to have carbon sequestration, and that comes back to who's going to pay for that, because that's a diffuse good. That doesn't make my life directly better in a way that I can measure.
Right. Yeah, and so is the customer going to see that value and pay that extra value if they have to? Gabriel, are you?
Yeah,
y'all are having lots of discussions.
No, I guess to build on that, you talk about how do you drive that to the customer and that, and I think it's, you talk a little bit about marketing and the messaging to the different customer bases. I think there's work to be done at the highest level to get some consistency and agreement from the powers that be and the sources of truth and trust around defining net zero. Is it a decarbonization? Are we minimizing? Are we getting to neutral? Are we going negative? And what measurable metric can we all be looking at on a dashboard every day from government, business, and then at the consumer level to create that alignment? I think there's like this fundamental common language and clarity that needs to happen there first and foremost. I think to Akash's point, is it possible? Will we get there? I think you're right. It's someone's got to pay for it. Who's going to pay for it? And if there isn't a value trade-off there, then which I don't think we see that today. Then it is going to be hard, and it's going to be a transition. I think DNV and McKinsey issued reports earlier this week that because the net zero is one thing, but net zero by 2050, now you're adding a time element to that, right? And there's this serious sense of urgency when we add that time element. But these reports are saying that it's very tight, if not impossible, if we do everything we can right now today. And to your point, I don't think that's going to happen. At the same time, waiting on some new technology to solve it for us is just too long and not going to happen either. So I think more work needs to be done again at that defining and clarity and laying out some pathways. So yeah,
You bet. Dr. Butler?
Isn't it amazing what happened to the earth worldwide when everybody went indoors during the pandemic? Wildlife came back, everything came back. Well, I think
no traffic.
No traffic. I mean, the air cleanup in Europe. I think that as we've lived on the planet, and Tom, we've talked about this earlier about the number of people that's increasing. I mean, the concept is net. It's like your golf course, like your golf score, net zero. Or you can just announce that you're green. So what companies did was to say, all of a sudden, well, we're a green company. What does that mean? So what has happened is there's a marketing campaign around that concept. But the question is, what's the dashboard? How do you measure it? Well, the key is net. I mean, I might have a firm who are really, really bad in one state and really, really good in the next state. Or as we said when I was in Vietnam, well, did you hit the guy? Well, he shot on the left, I shot on the right. We took the mean and we got him right in the middle, but I don't know where he is. So I think the measurement of things is, and the dashboard is kind of where you are when you think about it. But it's going to be a campaign that companies will do. But the big key is net, I think.
Yeah, it's called renewable energy credits, or RECs.
If I, Akash, you hit on the source of my cynicism around all the net zero pronouncement, be it 30, 50, whenever, because I ran a rep early days in the Texas deregulation, and it was before it was a given that everybody was going to have a green product. So we did a focus group, and we went out and we asked average consumers, would you pay more for a renewable product? And by show of hands, everyone in the room, absolutely. And then we asked the same question in the written portion of the exam without moving a comma, and it was 100% reversal. Because everybody wants to be seen as doing the right thing, but nobody wants to do it if it's inconvenient or more expensive. And I think that, Gabriel, you were talking about we'll get there, but there's been a natural progression of technology throughout history. We're not running trains with wood thrown into the boiler any longer, or coal that came after that. And as we progress, that carbon element in our life will go away. Electric vehicles, I think, is the greatest leap forward in decarbonization.
It is. It's huge because of the change in transportation.
Well, just to John's point, everybody went inside and air quality improved.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if every vehicle that was out there wasn't polluting, air quality
We just go to air quality problems in every city in this country.
Right.
And it's ozone, and it's from mobile source pollutions.
Absolutely.
okay, from cars and volatile organic compounds. So it's a big deal. I think we'll get there. And one thing that I see, the way technology will disrupt those things is you're seeing the falling prices of wind and solar and battery storage and those kind of things. That will help the integration process with thermal. But to just think that by 2030 we're going to be off of thermal, I mean, that doesn't resonate with me at all.
And then we'll all go to Disneyland.
Yeah, exactly. But the one thing that I do see that's happening in the renewables and battery world is they're being built in small modular form. So one of the challenges for utilities, being a good Doug that I am, is you start putting these smaller installations by the thousands and hundreds of thousands out in the hinterlands and residential and commercial. How do you manage all those two-way flows? We've talked about that a little bit. John, you brought that up also. Anybody from the audience with any questions? I'd love to hear. Yeah, come on.
Wonderful discussions. My favorite portion, if I could go back to it for 1 second, is on the consumer. I've got 12 years with nothing but the utility industry as my client, being a smart, compliant software company. And I have a tendency to say the most disruptive things, but I was sitting in my seat thinking about, I think the only way to really address the idea of what a customer really needs, Tom, is that you have to disabuse yourself of the notion that you're a utility person.
Yeah.
Forget everything you know. A customer wants one thing: power one house, cheapest way possible, and you're right, I don't care about any of the political stuff. If I can power it cheaply and reliably by myself, you want to get a customer excited, you say, here's how I can get electricity to my house, and I don't need any of these guys. Right? We don't need Digital 360 Summit. We just need to cheaply power our own house. Then you start thinking, now what's the business proposition? The next person that comes along and can answer that question, whether it's with technology or without, is going to be the person that then makes that customer happy. I mean, I think nothing about, I love all this stuff and I love it, but when I'm thinking about my customer, because I was thinking here, I don't have enough customers, right? And if a utility doesn't have enough customers or wants to please a customer, they have to stop drinking their own Kool-Aid and say, that customer just wants to power their own house cheaply as possible. Now, I don't know that there is a business proposition that does that without the utility industry. But I have seen some people, for instance, solar people that will come and say, tell you what, you can be completely off the grid. That's how to get a customer excited, right? You can be completely off the grid, and for a portion of what you're paying on your utility bill, we'll finance that out, just pay us a little bit, and now you don't have to use any utilities at all, right? So I'm just wondering, when we talk about what makes the customer happy, are we trying to make ourselves happy, or are we trying to make the customers happy and think about it that way? And I just want to see some of your responses to that.
Sure.
Well, that's a good question. We're trying to make money, right? And in doing so, maintain what the customers do. But let me take it direct. My dear father had degrees in agriculture. I mean, more degrees than a thermometer in agriculture. And he did rural electricity in Louisiana, the North Shore of New Orleans. I used to be there. I don't know if it's there after the storm or not. And all of the farmers were self-sufficient. They ran everything by windmill. They were not connected. All of the cows were milked by electric, at that time was coming online. So there was a time when we talked about just having electricity and not being connected. So if you go back to the future and ask, what's the analog of that today? Is it the Tesla car sitting in your garage? Is it the F-150 sitting in your garage where you don't have to worry about carbon monoxide when it goes out? So we have had a situation in America, throughout America, especially in rural America, where there was electricity. But it was all bought on by the windmill. And we thought that it was a good thing to move toward connectivity and to electrify everything and move away from the windmill. So like all things that we study and try to make patterns out of, the patterns are there for the past, from the past. but going back to those patterns which people are trying to do with windmills. So windmills are nothing new, right? So there can be a time with the new technology where all of a sudden, with the, whether it's a blockchain, and remember blockchain is just a technology that lines everything up in blocks, and so that you know about all the transactions and everybody can see the transactions. Well, we may go back to a time where, hey, I've got electricity, that's all I need. I don't care where it comes from. I don't care, as long as I can turn it on, I'm good. I charge my cell phone, I don't care if I charge it with the sun, I just want it to turn on when it comes on. So I think the model is there, and science has a tendency sometimes to back up. But it'll be hard to go back to that business model, but who knows? I think there's that business model right now in the North Shore of New Orleans.
I'll jump in. I think, look at the way the industry started in the late 1870s, 1880. It was all microgrids. Okay, when Sammy Insel went to Chicago to set up Commonwealth Edison, there were 45 power companies in downtown Chicago in 1883. Okay, and so the connectivity occurred to get to where you were talking about, which is I want more reliable power, because that little power gen set would go down every once in a while and I'd lose my lights and I'm upset. I want my lights. And so it's reliability, and then you got into the cost of scale to reduce the cost. Now the equation, same equation, it's just the numbers are changing. But reliability, I think, is at the heart of it. Jim?
Yeah, I'll just make 2 points. If the cheapest, most reliable, secure energy, affordable, is being connected to the grid today. Okay, that's just it, because of the scale advantages of the grid and that platform. That's the best thing. Yes, you can put solar on, you can put batteries in, but I ran a small solar company. You can have great solar, but let's talk about the roof leaks. Because the customers call to talk about the roof leaks. They also don't like roof leaks, I can tell you that. They'll come at you there. I think your point is well made. We used to have a term, right? And utilities do this, but all companies do this, right? We become focus groups of one. This is what I would like. So doesn't everyone else think exactly like I think? Because I'm a relatively bright person. But the fact of the matter is they're bright people too, and they think completely differently than I do. This is the challenge of being customer-centric in a world where, at the core, right now, the scale of a grid-based solution is the best solution. Now, I think what Don's doing, what other people are doing around that, makes an awful lot of sense, because there's a lot of hidden value that Don could probably bring to the market and decide how he shares that with his customers, right?
Oh, yeah, no, you absolutely summed up the essence of what an electric customer wants, which is, quite honestly, they want cheap power that comes on every time I switch the light. And it'd be nice if it happened from a neighbor, but what I really care about is me. And, and John's talking about on the North Shore of Louisiana, they ran it, but there's so many moving targets. I suspect they were running that off natural gas. And so that's going to be a carbon source. So we got to decarbonize, so we can't run that. But if I put solar on the roof, which I'm about to do, solar and batteries, I can go off grid at my place in the country. But I can assure you it's not the cheapest source, as Jim can attest, because once you put the battery, once you have that reliability, then that whole economics goes out the window. So we're sort of in a conundrum. He's absolutely right that the best, reliable, and cheapest source of power we have is the grid. And as technologies evolve, and as we get smarter as how to use the infrastructure we have, then we'll move toward a decarbonization, a more efficient deployment of the capital that's already on the ground, and the future.
I will say that where you will see, we'll close this one off, but where you will see is go to developing countries that don't have a grid or a reliable grid. Right. Okay, what you'll see is solar and storage and microgrids and those kind of things. And so it's no one answer.
Right, no, it's not.
No one answer. Every place is different. We've put an emphasis on universal service and reliability in North America that a lot of countries in Europe has the same, but a lot of countries don't have that same approach to things.
No, your one answer, Jim was talking about customer-centric. The problem is if the customers would stop moving around, we could come up with the one answer.
There is no one answer is the answer to that.
But remember also in America, there are customers who don't care how expensive it is. Some customers fly private jets. and pay $100,000 for tuition and never blink.
I've got a friend
So
putting
wouldn't
in
it be
a,
great to have customers, 800,000 of them who don't care what the tuition is?
I've got a friend that
Electricity.
in Dallas, Texas, okay, is putting in a 32 kilowatt Generac because she doesn't want to be without power again like she was in the winter. And she doesn't care how much it costs. No matter to her, it's 25 grand installation. Hook up a 2-inch gas line. Let's go.
Let her roll.
Let's roll. Got a question?
I think you generated more discussion with your question than I've seen in the last 3 days.
I love it.
And in fact, you're the only reason I got up here for the first time in 3 days. Yeah.
Thank both of you.
I don't know, how many people in here actually have an off-grid operation, facility off-grid
Currently, or by the end of next
Today.
week, I will. Yeah.
today?
Yeah.
How about at 8,600 feet elevation in the Rockies and where you've got to deal with other, I don't know where yours is located, but, oh, Buchanan, okay, great.
Yeah.
So where I'm at, just to share with you, and I think, Tom, your point, is sharing some examples offshore from here where people do run off-grid solar, batteries, et cetera. Often in those locations because they have no choice. There are no wires. I've got a client in the Philippines. There are 7,000 islands in the Philippines. The depth between the islands, they might be, quarter mile across, but it's half a mile deep and back up the other side. And it's just not economical to run the wires. I can tell you, those people on those islands, they would give their right arm to connect to a utility grid and get the cost and the reliability and just the simplicity, the convenience. Where I'm at, I've been running off-grid solar PV. I've got backup generators. I've got multiple generators because I just can't deal with having one not operate in the middle of a flood, the middle of a snowstorm, the middle of who knows what is going to happen up there. We live on a place called Storm Mountain, so just you can figure that one out. Okay.
Did you not read the travel brochure?
Plus, your co-op
Yeah,
might
thank
charge
you.
you a little to extend service.
It's better than the other place we almost bought with Rattlesnake Pond on the corner. I'm not making this up. I'm an Aggie. But the point is, cost is a big deal, but reliability is a big deal, power quality is a big deal. But there's another deal which, I think it's easy to forget about, and that is just the convenience and hauling fuel. I have to fuel my generator. Nobody ran a natural gas line up to the top of my mountain. Right. So I've got to haul propane or gasoline or diesel or, my fuel of choice. And so I do it gladly. I do love the panache of having a place off grid, but it is expensive. It is time consuming. Those things break and you got problems when it's least convenient. So I think there's just this huge value prop around the grid, which is why we're, the majority of us in here pay our bill each month. Okay. So there's just a lot to it, I guess.
I agree. There's a whole lot to it.
Having said all that, I can't wait to start optimizing with batteries here in town and up on the mountain. Anyway.
You bet.
Well, you know how to do it. I mean, you're used to it. You're doing it. Tom Rhodes asked me a question this morning. How could a storm go through Louisiana and 2 people die, and it gets to New York and 400 people die? Well, not only are we way up feet, but we're used to it. so you're just kind of used to, being off grid.
You bet. Was there another question in the audience? And then we'll close it off.
Sure. This is an invitation to speculate a little bit.
Sure. That's what you do. You predict the future.
There we go. So Tesla's registered to become a rep here in Texas. And I'd like to get your thoughts and just let it go of, do you consider that to be a harbinger of a whole range of significant new entrants with new business models into the Texas market?
Now, let's start down here with Don.
Yeah,
do 30 seconds. Yeah, okay. And then we're done. This is the last question.
I guess the quick answer is I hope so. But Tesla's ends are not all that hard to figure out when you read their comments. They sell batteries, they sell solar. It's not going to be a Joe Everybody solar or energy provider initially, because they see the value in distributed batteries. They see the value in what they bring as far as hardware, and they want to help customers monetize that and also incent more customers to buy it.
All right, Jim?
I honestly think, look, I would love a lot of larger capital providers to come in and do something, try anything. Customers will win. I mean, the problem is, and I've been a part of this problem for a long time in my prior life, the rep business was relatively staid and not really evolving at all to engage customers. I think it would be great if, even if Tesla comes in and does something that no one expects, great. Customers win. That's the best thing, is if somebody tries something new and somebody else will build on that, right? That's the thing, right? Build from people who've come before us.
Gabriel?
Yeah, I mean, I
Lightning
think.
round.
Sorry?
Lightning round.
No, look, I think, welcome to the market for Tesla. I mean, there's a lot happening in the market. Again, it's exciting times. Things are changing. They're not going to be the last one. There's going to be a lot of, newcomers, and there's room for that. I think, we're talking about grid and reliability. I mean, yes, it's cheaper and it's the most reliable, but it's not fully reliable, right? And so I think there's always room for improvement, whether it's cost, reliability. Welcome to them. So
Free nights and weekends, so I can charge my electric vehicle at night. Akash?
I agree with everything that's been said. I'll just add that I think one other business model that is going to piggyback off of what Tesla's doing is allowing consumers that are generating solar, storing it, selling it into the grid, measure their renewable energy credits at the point of generation, and monetizing that too.
I think, just real quick, I think that may be the first application of blockchain. I really do think that'd be, because otherwise, tracking that would be impossible. But that would be a wonderful application for residential consumers to be able to capture the financial value of RECs.
We started with John, we'll finish with John.
I think the wealthy will never be without electricity. I think
that's great.
And then somebody will come out and talk about the Tesla divide.
Before we give this panel a round of applause,